Yes? Oh, come in, Larry. This is Mr. Montgomery. I met him a few weeks ago in New York.
Oh, how are you? You live here?
Yes.
Well, maybe you know what a zombie is.
When a person dies and is buried, it seems there are certain voodoo priests who have the power to bring him back to life.
How horrible.
It's worse than horrible because a zombie has no will of his own. You see them sometimes walking around blindly with dead eyes, following orders, not knowing what they do, not caring.
You mean like Democrats?
The following has been rated PC for politically correct.
Pay attention, you just may learn something.
It's the Sage, Larry Elder.
Let's turn our attention now to the Mueller investigation. The Mueller investigation is recommending no jail time for Michael Flynn, President's first foreign policy advisor. Some are speculating that that's it, now. He's going to spill all the goods. Otherwise, he wouldn't have offered such a lenient term. Hold the phone. Up on LarryElder.com, we put an article called, "Is This It? A Trump Hater's Guide to Mueller Skepticism," written by a man named T.A. Frank. I would describe him as a liberal writer. I would describe the publication that he writes for, Vanity Fair, as a center-left publication. Very sophisticated publication, the same kinds of people that read the New York Times, read Vanity Fair. And here's what he wrote in part. It's a long article, very detailed, very thorough. Even if the special counsel presents one hell of a report, Democrats must ask, was it worth it? For many Robert Mueller watchers, like the ones on CNN, MSNBC, Hee-Haw, I added that part. He writes, the air these days is electric. People sense the big shoes are about to drop. Donald Trump has submitted his written answers to the Mueller questions. Paul Manafort has entered a plea agreement, but then continued to lie, at least according to Mueller. Jerome Corsi, a fringe right author and personality, is vowing to go to jail for life rather than to sign on to Mueller's version of reports. Roger Stone is expecting to be indicted for something. So is Donald Trump Jr. And most significant of all, to those looking for a big payoff, Michael Cohen has pleaded guilty to lying to Congress about the timeline of a deal he was trying to make to construct a 100-story Trump-branded tower in Moscow. Turns out the deal exploration continued past the time Trump had secured the nomination, and Cohen and his associate had even discussed giving Vladimir Putin a $50 million penthouse in the building. This is it, people are saying. This is a big one. T.A. Frank writes, quote, so what? Some of the news, such as the story that Manafort met 3 times with Julian Assange, seem to be based on nothing at all. But even the solid news turns out to be generally non-earth-shattering. As journalist Aaron Matei has pointed out, we already know the timeline of Cohen's Moscow efforts because BuzzFeed had already detailed them in May. But for those who hope for an unveiling of indictment linking Putin and Trump in a grand conspiracy, have no more reason to celebrate than they did a week ago or a month ago. It is sleazy, but not criminal, to take a meeting in Trump Tower with a Russian lawyer promising a dossier of dirt on Clinton. Just as it should be mentioned, it is sleazy, but not criminal, to pay a guy to go to Russia to put together a dossier of dirt on Trump. It is sleazy, but not criminal, to pursue a business deal while you're running for president. Mueller has nailed people for trying to prevaricate about their sleaze, so we already have a couple of guilty pleas over perjury, with more believed to be on the way. But the purpose of the investigation was to address suspicions of underlying conspiracy. That is, a plan by Trump staffers to get Russian help on a criminal effort. Despite countless man-hours of digging, this conspiracy theory, the one that's been paying the bills at Rachel Maddow for a couple of years now, has come no closer to being borne out. He continues, at some point, maybe we'll look back and think again about what was unleashed in the panic over Russian influence. Trump's White House has pursued what is arguably the harshest set of policies towards Russia since the fall of communism. Repeat that line. Trump's White House has pursued what is arguably the harshest set of policies towards Russia since the fall of communism. As for those tapping along to SNL songs in praise of Mueller and his indictments, They might want to remember that Trump won't always be in office. Weapons you create for your side today will be used by the other side against you tomorrow. Do you really want the special counsel investigation to become a staple of presidential life? It is a creation with few boundaries on scope and a setup that encourages the selection of a suspect followed by a search for a crime rather than the other way around. He writes, let's take a moment to consider Mueller himself. The cut of his jib is likable, and the trad Brooks Brothers vibe of his wardrobe is a perfect complement to his job title. But it's hard to avoid the suspicion that he's playing a political game at this point. The reports we're starting to see suggest a man who's fallen prey to the same kind of state of mind that warped Ken Starr, namely disgust over the people you're investigating and a desire to justify the sunk capital. Our justice system gives prosecutors a frightening amount of power as it is, and nothing tempts misuse of it quite like the belief in a narrative in the face of a disappointing witness. George Papadopoulos has told people he pleaded guilty to perjury because Mueller was threatening to prosecute him as an unregistered agent of Israel. Jerome Corsi insists that Mueller was and is threatening him with a raft of indictments unless he signs on to an untrue story of how he came to believe or know that WikiLeaks had hacked the emails of John Podesta. We do not know why Mueller feels Manafort is lying to prosecutors, but we do know that Mueller is either asking him about things that have little to do with Manafort's guilty plea, i.e. acting as an unregistered agent of Ukraine, or else asking him things that have little to do with the original purpose of the Mueller investigation, i.e. Russian conspiracy. He writes, quote, if it's any consolation to Trump haters, we can say this much. The special counsel's office is going to put together a hell of a report. It will have less sex than Starr's did, but that's for the best. And the testimony of Michael Cohen will still guarantee a lot of great scenes. Many of them certain to become immortal and embarrassing. Trump world won't fare well under a bright light. Its most ardent believers in collusion will claim vindication. But the international conspiracies will be few, and the collateral damage of the Russian scare will be extensive, stretching far beyond Trump or his circle to the country as a whole. It might hurt a president who many Americans hate, but even the president's most ardent foes should reflect on a question that will linger. Was it worth it? Speaking of which, Jake Tapper pressed House Judiciary Committee member Jerry Nadler, Democrat from New York, about the news about Michael Cohen admitting that he lied to Congress. Where's the collusion? Where's the conspiracy?
This is clearly not welcome news for the president. I don't want to pretend that it is. But once again, I look at these documents and I don't see any evidence of conspiracy between members of the Trump team and members of the Russian government to interfere in the election.
Well, first of all, the president obviously has to be feeling very upset and angry now that we know that Michael Cohen was lying to Congress in his behalf, and he has to be upset about what Michael Cohen has admitted to now, and presumably what he will admit to. And what he's admitted to is that he was negotiating a corrupt business deal in Russia on behalf of the president during the campaign, when the president was saying there was no business deal.
You call it a corrupt business deal? Then?
Well, the fact that it was negotiating with a foreign power for business deals while you're running for president.
Not illegal. You mean like more just colloquially?
Yes.
Corrupt.
Yes.
But still no conspiracy.
Well, wait a minute. It certainly tends to indicate, it's one more piece of evidence. Remember that, so now we know, or Cohen testifies to the fact that Trump, during the campaign, at the same time that he is dictating a change in the Republican platform to favor the Russians, at the same time that he can find nothing negative to say about Putin or about what they're doing, is in fact negotiating with the Russian government for personal business profits. He's mixing his personal business profits with respect and perhaps putting them over the interest of the United States and lying to the electorate about it.
Sure, it stinks. I'm not.
Tapper not impressed.
I'm not saying it's not, but it's not conspiracy is all I'm saying.
Well, first of all, it may be conspiracy.
Not to interfere with the election. There's no evidence of that.
No, but now you have another piece of evidence of active business dealings and conspiring by Trump with the Russian government at the same time that you have other people who are agents of Trump dealing with all the things we've seen about hacking with Guccifer 2 and the WikiLeaks and everything else. It's another point of Trump's close relationship with the Russians while he was denying it. And it all tends in the same direction.
So President Trump responded to basically what you said earlier today. Let's play that. He basically says he wasn't president. He was just a candidate. He can do what he wants. Take a listen.
Even if he was right, it doesn't matter because I was allowed to do whatever I wanted during the campaign.
Is that true?
No, he's not allowed to do whatever he wants to in the campaign.
Okay.
But he is allowed to have private business dealings with the Russians. He is not allowed to have private business dealings with the Russians and lie to the American electorate about it, and at the same time change the Republican platform with respect to the Russians. In other words, to mix his public policy and probably the public policy going forward into his presidency based on
when you're saying he's not allowed to, I'm not disputing that it stinks, but
when you can't convince Jake Tapper of CNN, and they have their meetings every day, Trump, 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 Trump. Remember what Jeff Zucker once said, according to Project Veritas? One of the producers said that in a conference call, Zucker complimented them on a story they were doing about the Olympics and said, that's great, let's get back to Russia. And they've got Van Jones, a Project Veritas tape, referring to the Mueller investigation as a nothing burger.
It's not illegal, right?
It's not illegal to have business dealings with the Russians. It's not illegal to change the Republican platform. It may very well be illegal to take that public, and it's certainly illegal if he has done anything as president based on his business relationships with the Russians. This is another piece of evidence going toward that conclusion.
When you can't convince Jake Tapper, a colleague of Chris Cuomo, a colleague of Don Lemon, you probably got bupkis.